Alright guys, let's go ahead and get started here. Okay, so here's your warm-up question. What are the four shapes we can make? We already had many tells. One was an S curve and one was a U. Okay, but what determines whether it's an S or a U? The degree. Good. What does degree mean? Highest exponent. Okay, so now what about it? Is our highest exponent even or odd? Good job. So if it's even, what shape are we making? A U. If it's odd, we're making an S curve. Are those the only two?
The opposite.
There's the opposite. So I could be a down U or a flipped S curve. How do you make something flip? Negative leading coefficient. Alright, so we're going to look at the degree and the leading coefficient. Degree is a positive or negative. Leading coefficient, or degree is it even or odd? Leading coefficient is positive or negative. Okay, so look at this one right here. F of x equals negative 2x cubed minus 5x plus 6. What shape is that going to make? It'll be, how do you know it's an S? Good, so the 3 is odd, so it's going to be an S. But is it a normal S or a flipped S? How do you know it's a flip? So I'm going to flip, so this is going to look like the end behavior makes that shape, right? Great. Now, that's all does this negative 5x, do we worry about that for the shape? No. We'll talk about what that does today. Okay, so the first thing we talked about last time was the end behavior, and now we're talking about multiplicity. Multiplicity is how many times the root is used. So let's just look at this example here. There are 3 x-intercepts or 3 roots. And it's whatever will make each of these turn to 0. So let's start with this easy one here. X plus 1. What value would turn that to 0? Negative 1. Good job. What about in the middle? What would turn that to 0? 5. And then lastly, what if it's just an x? Not 1. It's 0. Good job. Because what value makes that 0? 0, right? So we have 3 x-intercepts. However, what's going on here with the 5? What does that squared tell you? I'm using it twice. That's what multiplicity is. It's how many times your root is used. And last time, what did we say would happen if the root is used an even number of times? It bounces off of it. So if I were to graph this, if it's not bouncing, what's it doing? It's going through, it's crossing. So 0 on the graph, it would cross. 5, it would bounce. And negative 1, it would cross. Because how many times are these used if it doesn't show an exponent? Just once. Good job, guys. Alright, what we're going to do is we're going to finish your notes from last time on end behavior and multiplicity. And then we'll tie right into graphing. And then we're going to do a little bit of graphing as well. Now just as scheduling, today we're starting graphing. We're going to finish graphing and talk about writing equations and conjugate roots on Monday. We're going to review on Wednesday, and then your first test is that Friday. Okay? So that's coming up. By the end of today, you should be able to take your last quiz. There's 3 quizzes. There's the add, subtract, multiply. That was your first one. There's the divide, and now we're going to have one on graphing. Then what we're going to do is have a test on basically those 3 quizzes. Do you have any questions on that? Okay, so that's what to expect. So make sure you're studying. If you need to retake quizzes, come and talk to me. Best time is after school, but not Monday because that's faculty meeting. Alright, you guys got your notes, right? Let's keep on rolling here. So I believe we left off. Yes. You weren't here last time. Okay. Okay, let's get you guys notes. Tell me where was the last place we stopped with notes last time? I want to say it was it this one? Okay, everyone let's go to this page. Now, if you missed class, let me just show you where you can find the notes. Back there you see that box that says secondary 3. That's where you'll go. And the last lesson we did was multiplicity and end behavior. So you go in that folder, and then there's going to be a folder for notes and a folder for homework, so you get those. So who said they need Braylon and who else? Let me get you two. So you guys, you can find the rest of the notes on Canvas. I put the computer notes there, but we're gonna finish it today. You're welcome. All right, let's get started. We're gonna do a lot today. We're gonna go fast, and I'm gonna ask a lot of questions, so be ready to answer those questions, okay? Using our flashcards, yay. All right, so let's do this first one together, and then I'll give you a second to work with your buddies. Go from there. What we're gonna do is determine, based on this, what is the x-intercept? What is the multiplicity of those x-intercepts? So will that bounce or cross? Then we're going to have to figure out what is the degree and what is the shape going to be so we can graph it. Alright, so let's first talk about the x-intercept. What will make these turn to 0? This one right here, what makes it turn to 0? -1. Now notice, this one is squared. That's how many times it's used. That's the multiplicity, so the multiplicity is 2. Since that 2 is even, what does that tell you? It bounces right there. So I'm going to come over to my graph here. I'm going to put an x-intercept at 2, and I'm going to put a b by it to remind me it's bouncing there. So I don't cross it, I bounce off of it. Let's go to the next one. This one, what is the root going to be here? What makes that 0? 1. How many times is it used? So what's going to happen there? It's going to, that 3 is odd, so that's where it's going to cross. So if it's even, it bounces. If it's odd, it crosses. So I'm going to go to, wait, I did this wrong. Sorry guys, let me erase that here. Alright, so I got confused with the multiplicity. The x-intercepts are at 1 and -1. I was putting the wrong thing on there. So you see me make a mistake, stop me. So at 1 we're crossing, and at -1 we're bouncing. Alright. Now, do you have any questions on that so far? Is that pretty straightforward? Stop me if you have a question. What we're going to do now is we need to figure out what shape is this going to make. Is it a U or an S? Is it flipped or is it not flipped? Now, when we were looking in standard form, like when we looked at other examples and it was all multiplied out, and there were different terms like that, we would say look at the highest exponent, right? This is not standard form, this is intercept form. The way you're going to figure out what your degree is you count up how many x's there are. How many x's are in this one? 3 of them. So I have 1, 2, 3. How many right here? So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so my degree is 5. What shape will it make if the degree is 5? An S. Do we see any negatives out in front? Nope, so this is just a regular S curve. So if I were to graph this, I'm going to make an S, so I'm going to start down here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through to -1 and I'm going to bounce off of it. And then I'm going to cross up. Now, one other thing, we're going to talk more about this later, but to figure out the y-intercept, you're just going to multiply all of the numbers. Now, how many 1's are there? There's 2, right? Because it's squared. So I'll do 1 times 1. And here I'll do -1 3 times. -1 times -1 times -1. And then times that with this one. If I do 1 times 1 times -1 times -1 times -1, I'm going to get -1. So this has a y-intercept at -1. Okay, let's graph this. So this is going to come up like this. It's going to come down like that and go like that. Something like that. Maybe that's not the best drawing, but it's accurate enough. How are you going to check your work? Mindy, is the internet working?
Yes.
Awesome. Get out your Chromebook. Flip it open. I want you to go to Desmos.com, get the graphing calculator. And I want you to put in, don't put in f of x, put y equals this into Desmos. Remember to do an exponent, you do shift 6. And that gets you in your exponent. And then if you want to get out, you just push the right arrow to get out. So I want everyone to graph this and compare. We're not going to do this for all of them, but I want to make sure you guys can all do that, okay? So get out Desmos, put that in, and if you need help, ask your neighbor or ask me. I'm more than happy to help. I got to this one and I was like, is this where we're at? And you're like, yeah. So
Well, I was like, yeah, and I look up and I'm like, wait a minute.
it wasn't. Y equals, and then do the parentheses, x plus 1 squared, and then x minus 1 cubed. How does it look? You look pretty good? It's kind of zoomed out. You know how to zoom in? That was pretty good, right? Let's see if it looks okay. Yeah. That looks great. Good job. Again, if you have questions, please call me over. Alright, so as I'm watching some of you guys graph this, does our graph look pretty good? It's not perfect. One way that I noticed that my graph is different than your Desmos, does it cross smoothly here at 1? What does it kind of do at 1? Kind of makes an S curve, right? How come? Why doesn't it just cross smoothly? Well, what's the multiplicity at 1 is? 3. So that's the difference. If the multiplicity is odd but it's 1, it crosses smoothly. But if it's a 3, it's actually going to make kind of an S curve like that. So that's how you can make it a little more accurate. Okay? Alright, now here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a second here, and I want you to do as much of this next one as you can. There are going to be 3 x-intercepts, and I want you to talk to your neighbor, and I want you to see what are the 3 x-intercepts. What is the multiplicity of each intercept? And what does that mean? Will it bounce or will it cross? Then, count up how many of the x's you have. So, what is our degree? So, what shape will it make? I'm going to give you about a minute or so. Talk with your neighbor and try to figure that out. So, it's practicing for you to do this on your own, okay? Okay, go ahead, try that out. I don't see Emily Bauer. Adrian Fabudoa. Not this Adrian, right? No. Jade Angela Nelly. Brian Mateo. Go to Antonio. Antonio, what are our x-intercepts going to be on this one? Start right here. So you're thinking, what will make this become 0? So what value of x would turn this into 0? So -1. What about right here? Good. And what if it's an x or an x squared? Good job. Now let's talk about the multiplicity of each of those. So, Madison, what is the multiplicity for each? So the multiplicity is just how many times they're used. That's going to be the exponent. Yeah, so for the 4, it's going to be 3. For the -1, it will be 1. And what about for the 0? That will be 2. Now what we're going to do is based off whether that multiplicity is even or odd, that determines does it bounce or cross. So what happens at 0? Bounces. What about at 4? And notice that's at 3, so remember what we saw last time with that 3, it kind of makes an S curve. And then at -1 it's going to cross, but just kind of smoothly. So I'm going to come over to my graph, and at 0 I'm going to put a B, because it's bouncing nice and smooth, or bouncing. At 4 it's going to cross, but it's going to make kind of an S curve there. At -1 it's going to cross, but it's just a nice smooth crossing. Okay, Angela, we need to figure out the degree, which is just how many x's we're working with. So how many total x's are we seeing here? So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but then one more, 6. Awesome. So what shape are we going to make if it's 6? U shape. However, on this one, notice we've got a negative. What is that going to do to it? Flip it down. So this one is going to be a flipped U like that. Okay, that's all we need for graphing here, guys. We're going to start at negative infinity, and then it's going to come up to -2, and it crosses. It's going to bounce, and then do kind of an S curve right there. So I'm going to graph that like this. I know some of you were going ahead and you graphed this on Desmos. Does that match what you did on Desmos?
Yeah.
Awesome. That's how you can check your work. I'm not going to have everyone check it each time we run out of time real quick. Okay, now I think did we start too far ahead? Did I skip a slide? So let's actually go back here. So some of you guys are trying to get done too soon. We need to do this one, right? Let's redo these ones, okay? So Ruby, help me out with this f of x. What are my x-intercepts going to be here? Awesome. So we only have 2 x-intercepts. What are their respective multiplicities? In other words, how many times are they used? That's when you're going to look at the exponents. There we go. So the 5 is the 1, and then this is 4. And if based on if it's even or odd, it's going to bounce across. So what happens at 5, guys? 5 guys, burgers and fries. Okay. And then what about -5? It's going to bounce. There we go. Okay, Oscar, how many total x's do we have in our equation? You got 5, so what shape is that? The U would be if we're even. But since 5 is odd, what's it going to be? An S curve. Good job. So degree is 5. So it's going to be an S curve. So I'm going to come over here. At 5, I have an x-intercept where I'm crossing. And at -5, I have an x-intercept where we are bouncing. We're going to do an S curve. So this is going to come up from -infinity and bounce. And it actually goes down a really long ways. But I can't go that far down, so I'm just going to go to that. Then it crosses at 5. Now remember that trick I told you about the y-intercepts, how if you just times the numbers? This would be 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 times -5. It's going to be a really big number, right? Like -3,000 something. So this graph actually goes down a really far way, but we're just going to graph that, okay? Okay, 30-second head start. I want you to just try to fill out for this. What are the x-intercepts? What's the multiplicity? Does it bounce or cross? What's the degree? What shape does it make? Okay? Get a little faster at this, so hopefully you can do it a little quicker. And again, if you get stuck, please call me over. Yes. So that's the multiplicity. How many times it's used? In other words, those exponents. If the exponent is even, then it's Yeah, so if you look at the actual times it's used, not whether the root itself is big enough, but how many times it's used, that's the multiplicity. Does that make more sense?
Yeah.
Awesome, thanks for asking. Awesome, what sheet is that? Go ahead and see. Let me check these, but they all match up. Alright, Nelly, help me out on this one. So what will be my x-intercepts? What will turn this to 0? What will turn that to 0? So what value of x? Yeah, so what number could I plug in that if I subtract 3 from it is 0? You have a guess on it? Alright, that's alright. So what number, if I, basically a way you can think of it is you just do the opposite. What's the opposite of negative 3? Positive 3. Because 3 minus 3 gives you 0, so your x-intercept is 3. What's the opposite of 7? Negative 7. So these are the x-intercepts. Alright, there we go. Hey, let's send this to Mindy. What is the multiplicity of each of those? So what will happen at both of those? On both of them. So I'm going to come over here. Negative 7 is right about here, and it's bouncing. 3 is right here, and it's also bouncing. Were you guys able to get that on your own? If so, good job. If not, I hope you see your mistake and that you're good. Okay, let's go to Brian. Right here. Do we have 2 Brians? Come here. So we have 2 Brians, right? Okay, that's what I was thinking. Go to this Brian, I'll go to you next time. So this Brian, how many total x's are you seeing on this? I tell you, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the degree is 6. That makes a u. But what does that negative do to the u? Flips it down. So 3 is 6. We're going to make a basic u shape. So when I'm graphing this, I'm going to come up from negative infinity, bounce off, go down a long way, come here, bounce and go back down like that. Kind of makes this like M shape. And that's the graph. Again, how do you check your work? Go on to Desmos. For those who have already done it on Desmos, does it look something like that? It's not perfect, but does it look something? It doesn't bounce down again? Let me look at it. Oh, that's blue. Is that what you're looking at? Oh, so the thing is that it bounced down, so it keeps falling out. It bounces down so fast.
So like lined up.
Yeah, it looks like it does. Yeah, but
I'm
if
like,
you
this
zoom out.
is in the negative like thousands.
Yeah.
I'm like scrolling down.
Well, so guys, if you look at this, so when Mindy was graphing it, it's really, so you have to zoom out really far. And one of the reasons is because our numbers here, my y-intercept is going to be 7 times 7 times 7 times 7 times negative 3 times negative 3. Is that going to be a big number?
It is unimaginably
Yes.
big.
How do you know that bounces?
Okay, good question. So this is your x-intercepts, right?
Yeah.
Now the multiplicity is going to be how many times that intercept is used, or in other words, the exponent there. If that exponent is even,